My name's Jeff St Laurent. This is the Live Tuesday call, and we have a great crew on right now, and we have a great topic, and that is how to get in the game and stay in the game to work your coaching business. And obviously we've got to do that consistently, and that's a topic of it's always a big relevant topic for anyone in business, but especially us coaches, whether you're doing this full-time, want to do it full-time, whatever your life situation is, job, no job, kids, no kids. There's a constant challenge with entrepreneurship in general that I've got to be able to, it's really accountability. How do I stay accountable to moving forward, and how do I get into that space? Obviously, I came back from vacation last week, and it was it's like, oh my God, I woke up on Monday and I'm like, what day is it? That's how you know when you're on vacation, when you have no idea what day it is, and you don't care. But I was like, oh, I think I have to care today. I think it's Monday, and then I realized, as I was going through that, I'm like, you know what, I definitely have some things that I do. It's really a mindset shift to get myself in the game, and then obviously to keep me there. I want to share some of those things briefly with you today. But before we do that, I do record all these calls and I place them in my university each and every week on my website, sellingcoaching.com. So go to sellingcoaching.com, check out the university. You got fantastic resources there. And additionally, right on the homepage of sellingcoaching.com, I have a great resource called The Ultimate Startup Guide for New Coaches. So it's a downloadable PDF and audio resource. So it's definitely something you deserve to check out. When you do that, you can get that instantly when you enter your name and email. That's also going to put you on my email community. And the reason I really want you on there, not only just to receive the great stuff that I send you each week, valuable stories, tips, etc., relevant for us, obviously, coaches, as I help coaches transition to full-time, but I also want you to be able to check out and see how I utilize email to stay in touch with my audience. As I mentor people one-on-one, that's typically when we get to that spot of creating their email community, if you will, an email list, and setting all that up. It's sometimes the most resistant spot because it's, oh my God, how do I do this? And how many times do I have to email people? So I want you to begin to utilize how I do that, because if we ever did work together with one-on-one mentor coaching, or even if I did some group stuff with you, I want to make sure that you can see that and see how it's done. It's so vitally important that we stay top of mind. With that being said, if you are in a position where you find yourself, knowing you need some help, some specific guidance, I'm available for one-on-one mentor coaching, whether you're starting off or you've done it for a little while, whether you're frustrated and you need that help, or you don't want to get to that spot. The best thing to do is just go to sellingcoaching.com, the Work With Me page, scroll to the bottom. I've got a form there. You can fill that out. I'll follow up with you. I'll give you a call. Yes, I'll call you. That's why I teach people, so I do it. And we'll just create a relaxed conversation and just see what's most appropriate for you, and if now's the right time, and we can go from there. So with that being said, let's jump into the topic of getting in the game and staying in the game as we work our coaching business. And as I started the call off today, one of the things I mentioned is accountability. And really at the end of the day, with entrepreneurship, the biggest challenge I know that I've found and seen as I've worked with many entrepreneurs over the years, I've been doing this full time since 2004. Before that, I had my own back in high school, I had my own painting and landscaping company, if you will. I like to call it a company, but it was just me cutting grass and painting houses. But I was an entrepreneur, and after that, I had personal training. I had my own business as well. So I like to say I'm psychologically unemployable and been an entrepreneur pretty much my whole life. But what I've found is the biggest challenge with that and working with them is, like I said, is that accountability, because we're only accountable to ourselves. So come Monday after a vacation, or any day for that matter, or even if you've got a full-time job, full-time life, and you have a couple hours set aside for your business, therein comes the dilemma of, okay, well, I've got a couple hours set aside for my business. What do I do? And if you don't do anything, well, it doesn't matter, because there's no boss or what, everyone just saying, hey, here's what you're going to do, and why aren't you doing it? There's no accountability for that. We're our own accountability, and that requires a sense of discipline. It also comes with a sense of purpose. If we don't have that purpose, we don't have that why. If we don't know what we're going after, especially if we're overwhelmed and there's so many options, oftentimes we don't know where to begin. And that's often, I find that too, even some of my newer clients, as they come to me and we're starting to narrow things down, and they come to me on the second or third session. Sometimes, they're like, well, I've been reading this, and I've been talking to this person, and I've been getting these emails, and I've been seeing this, and I'm like, wait a minute, we got to narrow this down. Like, there's a lot of different ways to do this business. no one is necessarily right or wrong for that matter, but it's just like we've got to narrow things down to keep you started. So that's one of the first things that I've always done for myself is I always keep things very simple. Even talking to a potential client yesterday on the phone, kind of helping them, figure out where they are in their world and in terms of starting their business off. I'm hearing of all the things that they have and all these options, and I'm like, man, we've got to talk about where you're going to start and what direction you're going to go in. There's a lot of paths, but one of the first things is, like I'll say, is just narrow it down. You got to find a place to start. And usually, if you're a student of mine, you'll know I always teach, it's like, well, you've got to start with, who you help with what specifically, that headline, if you will, and you've got to know there. So, but even from there, it's just, what's the next step? What's the one next step? Choose your path to get going. And if you've got too many things going or too many ideas open, and this is at any phase of your business, this isn't just starting off. Even my clients that I'm working with, mentoring with every year and a half, 2 years, some of them, I've had the great fortune of doing that with those people, is they've got everything going, but then oftentimes they just go, oh, I want to start a group program and I want to do this and I want to, you fill in the blank. They often can confuse themselves and they don't gain any traction. One of the things I've seen with entrepreneurs is that entrepreneurs are never short on ideas, right? We're always like, oh, I've got this great idea. We're in the shower or we're sleeping, we're driving, we're wherever we are, and we just have these fantastic ideas that we want to do with our business and things that we want to have. And I'm not saying, hey, don't follow through with any of those ideas. What I'm saying is hey, let's write those ideas down to kind of make sure we don't lose those ideas. I have an idea folder. It's literally it's called ideas. I've changed the label at certain points. At one point it was called crazy ideas, but either way, it's just a Word document, and I just write down all my crazy ideas over the years. I can't tell you how many pages I have as of now after doing this as long as I have. Even back in the fitness world, when I was doing that stuff, I have pages of stuff, even written down before I was heavy into computers back 20 plus years. But either way, I always write those ideas down, and this is another tip I'll give you now right off the bat is just start writing down all your ideas so you're not going to forget any of them, and you're just going to know which of those ideas or which one of those things you're starting to move with right now. Again, that's another way of narrowing it down to starting it off. So this way you're not scared of losing any ideas, but then also you can stay focused on where you're doing or where you're going with that. So that's a huge element of not only staying in the game, but also getting in the game is having that starting point and knowing what that next focus is, and staying focused around that as you move forward. And so that's where, with entrepreneurship, therein lies the challenge of so many ideas. So we gave you some tips around there, but then having some accountability for it. And that's where, obviously, yes, we can hire coaches. You can hire someone like myself, a mentor coach. You have some accountability for it. But oftentimes, even with that, I find that it's not enough necessarily. And so that's where what I want you to be able to do as you get going is you need some external accountability with people. So it's not just a coach that you hire necessarily, or a mentor coach like myself. That's an element, like I said, but it's more of like the people that you're going to be talking to within your audience. And typically right away, you don't have an audience. And not to get off on a tangent, but that's with the ideas that I was just talking about right there. A lot of the ideas that coaches want to do, they're kind of way ahead of where they're at in their business, whether they're starting off or even in your first year or 2 years. Sometimes you don't have a large audience or many people at all initially right away. Typically it's just friends and family. So all these ideas, while they sound good and you might want to do them, there's a time, if you will, a time and a place. I can hear my mom, there's a time and a place, right? But there's a time and a place to do those things. And typically a lot of it's like you got to wait to do some group programs. You don't have to, but like that's a thing that I recommend. It's like a lot of coaches want to do group stuff. It's like, well, hold off a little bit. Start to build an audience. Start to find your message. Start to, develop and hone the audience and create a relationship and understand them and what they want and what their major needs are. And then once you have some of those people and developed over time, you've worked with dozens of clients. Now you start a group program. It's tailored more specifically to them because you know what they want. You know the message better. It's valuable for them. And you've got, dozens of people that have already paid you for stuff that you can start to pull from. And then an additional, hopefully hundreds of people that you've developed relationships with over a year, 2 years, etc. You could pull into that group as an example. Right, so now you can actually fill that class a lot easier because it takes work to fill a class. You don't just throw an email out or do a post on social media and all of a sudden you've got 10 people in your group. It just doesn't work that way. So like I said, there's a time and a place for different ideas and execution with your business. So we've just got to find out what's right at that initial phase. But then circling back to that accountability piece and moving forward is we've got to be accountable to those people. So this is how those two of those things just tie together is, there's time and a place for those ideas. So be patient, focus on one thing. But then also it's like where you can gain your accountability outside of a mentor coach like myself or a regular coach, etc., or even just some friends. Sometimes coaches, they go through school, etc., they have peer groups. And while there can be some accountability at the end of the day, I've done so many groups, I've worked with so many people, and at the end of the day, people can still come back to a session and be like, yeah, I haven't done it yet, or you know what, there's just so much going on in my life, etc. So that's where, as you develop an audience, you become accountable to them. And that's why when I work with my clients one-on-one mentoring, I set up an accountability structure, if you will, through weekly events like a live Tuesday call, etc., through their email communications. Like I said earlier, when you get that free resource from my website at sellingcoaching.com, the ultimate startup guide for new coaches, you get all my email community. So you start to see how I utilize that. And that becomes my accountability, right? That becomes my accountability to everybody else. Showing up for a call like this. Some of my clients do Facebook Lives, they do YouTube Lives, they do podcasts, etc. But they start to create expectations with the people that they have in their audience. Expectations of emails, email frequency, live events like calls, etc., like I just described. And they start to put that out there. And believe it or not, even when you have few people, relevant contacts, or even if it's initially just friends and family, which I always recommend starting off with. We're going to start off with somebody, but those people then become our accountability. In other words, we tell people this is what we're doing on a weekly basis. We set an expectation with them. Now, hopefully what that does is that triggers values that you have, like you value your word, you value your reputation, you value what you say, you value that you follow through with what you say and what you promise. Hopefully that's the case. And I say that, but also I realize some people, and I have worked with some clients over the years, that they're like, yeah, sometimes if I tell people I'm going to do something and I don't do it for whatever reason, even if it's not really a quote good reason or a quote valid reason, they're like, sometimes that's not enough for me because, you know what, I'll just make an excuse or just, you know what, don't care. I couldn't do it. So you know what? Maybe they will blow off a call, blow off a Facebook Live, not do the emails, even though they promised it, So I realize that there are all those people out there. Doesn't mean that's bad. It just means that I want you to start to understand who you are and how you operate. This entrepreneurship really, at the end of the day, is a figuring out process. It's a process of figuring out, said differently, of who you are and how you operate in this new space. A lot of people aren't necessarily entrepreneurial. I would definitely say I'm entrepreneurial at heart. Some people are, but some people aren't. So start to figure out who you are as a person. A lot of people are more employee minded, right? That's all they've had is jobs. That's all they know is a job. They have that, if you will, sense of security, if you will. But now then when they're on their own, it's tough to have that accountability. They kind of drift around. They get distracted. It's a lot of the elements that I've spoken about so far. So, when it comes to that perspective, you need to start to understand who you are and how you operate, and then what conditions do you thrive under the most. So these are some of the questions that I'll give to you, which I've asked myself and I've learned along the way. These are some of the things that I've learned about myself that allow me to thrive. And so what I'm asking you is what under what conditions do I thrive the most? Under what conditions I'm the most accountable? Am I the most disciplined? Am I the most self-disciplined? I guarantee you, if you came to me and you said, oh, Jeff, I'm not very disciplined, I'm not very patient, you fill in the blank. I guarantee you have self-discipline, or you have patience, or you have whatever that quality is or attribute that you say you don't have. It just might be that in this situation or the circumstances in your world right now with where you're an entrepreneur, your job, your family, where you're working, the times you're working, the kids, whatever it is, right? It might just be the situation are not situations that you thrive with. So we've got to understand, well, where have I been self-disciplined? Have I been self-accountable? Have I been, like I said, you fill in the blank, and start to understand some of those elements. So I can share about some of the things that I've done over the years, like I have already. But what I've had to do is I've had to answer those questions. If you're doing a weekly event like this, under what conditions do I thrive? Those are some things I help my mentoring clients with is, well, what works for you? Like I do calls like this because I can thrive in the moment when people call in live, and I can just have a topic like how to get in the game and stay in the game when it comes to working your coaching business. And I can kind of do my little introduction, and I can just shoot off. And a lot of times, depending on the topic, I've got to stop myself from going an hour, 2 hours, because I can do that. That's just where I've come from, and I understood is that, when I'm in that precious situation, when there's live people at a live event or something like this, things slow down for me, and I can focus. Sometimes if things are too slow, and that's, if you will, my ADD, right? And I understand that I need those high stimulating, high pressure situations for things to slow down for me in my brain, if you will, and all of a sudden I can focus and stuff starts coming out. And sometimes it's good stuff, sometimes it's fantastic stuff. But I've learned that, okay, until I have that type of situation, I can't get anything done, right? So sometimes it's stressful, but for me, I need that stress, like I said. So what I want for you to do is I want you to find out, as an example like that, well, what type of stress is good for you? What type of stress is bad for you? What situations do you thrive in? And then you've got to put yourself in those situations, right? So if I don't have clients during the day, some days I'm loaded up with clients, some days I'm not, right? So like after this call, for instance, I had a client, but they rescheduled earlier today. So I've got a couple hours before I go get my son and blah, blah, blah. Next thing you know, I'm going to be with my son for the rest of the day because he's off for the summer. So I've got a couple hours of work. I know that if I don't have anything filled in my calendar, bullet pointed in there, I'm going to hang up the phone from this, get off whatever time it is, and then all of a sudden it's just like those 2 hours can drift away very, very quickly. So I know ahead of time that before I get to that spot, that time spot in my book, I've got to have bullet pointed things. So I can look at my calendar right now and it's like, all right, I got some things to do. I've got people to call. I've got things to follow up on. I've got emails to follow up. I'm going to Facebook Messenger and blah, blah, blah. There's some specifics in there. But as soon as I hang up, I know what to do. But those are little things that I've realized that when I didn't have it in there, I'd hang up the phone. I'm like, all right, got a couple hours before my, quote, business hours are done. I think I'm going to go to the bathroom. I think I'm going to go get some food. I think, wow, it's a beautiful day outside. I'm just going to, go get some sun for a minute and stretch. Next thing you know, I'm weeding. You know what I mean? Or next thing you know, I'm cleaning up the garage. Or who knows? You know what I mean? And so call it ADD, call whatever, it doesn't matter. It's just I'm doing laundry. So I've got to have that focus. I've got to have that self-accountability. So I've found ways to do that. And these are the things I want you to do for yourself. Is how do I keep myself focused, or how do I keep myself in that game, and then also strategies of getting in that game. So it's like I said earlier when I opened this call up today, it's that mindset, right? That's all it is it's what we're telling ourselves. And there's those times where it's just like, oh my God, and you're just not in the mindset. You're not in the zone. You're not even close to that planet of being productive. And there's this line I'll talk about now with that is there's going to be times where you're not productive. And I'm not saying that I'm this machine over here and I'm just this magnificent piece of work that's just like, wow, I'm so good. There are days that I am freaking awesome, and there are days that I freaking suck. And I'm being honest with you, where I'll have the 2 hours, and even when I have stuff written down, I'm just not in it. So that's the line that I want you to understand is there'll be time where I might just be like, you know what? I'm blowing it off because I can't focus. And I've understood that about myself over the years. And now what I do now is instead of just painfully sitting in my office and pretending to do work, where at the end of the day, 3-4 hours pass and then I leave my office and I really didn't do anything. I didn't do anything productive. And even the stuff that if I was surfing the internet for whatever I was surfing for, that maybe I need something for the house or whatever, I didn't even buy something like that. So it's even worse that I'm not productive. And then I leave the office and now I'm feeling guilty because I'm like, oh, of course I have stuff to do, but I didn't do it. So you've got to understand the times where you just got to call it a day and you got to get your ass out of the office and you got to play, or you got to rest, or just turn the TV on and go for a run, or, whatever it is that just you do for fun. Just enjoy yourself and at least feel good about it. But the line therein comes is that, okay, well, if that happens today and then it happens tomorrow and the next day, the next week, or out of a couple weeks, you've only got 1 or 2 productive days. Now there's that, we're abusing it, right? Now you're just, well, Jeff said get out of the office, so I'm just getting out of the office. Okay, great today, but what about tomorrow? So we've got to be able to find strategies to get that mindset that no matter what's going on in our life, because we're humans and life can be magnificent, but life can also suck, right? And I say that with love, right? I mean, we're being honest with ourselves. Sometimes we go through really tough times, and I don't care how optimistic you are and how positive you and how much you reframe it and ask yourself different questions and all the great coaching stuff that we love. Sometimes things just suck, and that's just truth. And so we've got to know that line of, okay, when is it am I gonna just call it a day and just kind of have one of those F it days and I'm leaving the office? And okay, if it's happening, what are the questions I'm going to ask myself? How do I force myself into that zone? And I hate to use the word make and have to and force, right? Those are very pain-based words. Yet at the end of the day, you're an entrepreneur and you got to show up like at a job. Like, here's the thing about a job, right? Sometimes, like, or maybe a lot of times, depending on your job, like you hate going to work, or you have to go to work, or you must get up and you must do it. And it's painful, right? And even in a job that you love, there are days where you do that. But guess what? You still show up at work. And yeah, you can have sick days, you can have personal days. But guess what? Those are limited. Even if you've got a bank of them, you can only use them so much. So there are days where you draw the line, you say, you know what? I'm not going in today. Great, you called in sick. But there's a certain point where it just, even if you're still sick and tired or exhausted or just don't want to go in, you still go in. And that's what I'm talking about here is those days where you've still got to go in. So you've got to go in and then you've got to get yourself into that zone. So like even yesterday, like I said, waking up, for my vacation, and I had, the ends of the weekends, so it was probably like, 10 or so days where I didn't do anything. And I replied to a few emails and I had some scheduled posts to my Facebook and I checked my group, whatever, and approved some members, so it's not like I did zero for my business, but it was kind of zero compared to what I'm doing on a regular basis. But I had to get up and I was itching to get back, number one, because I knew I had some stuff to do. But I had to ask myself some questions, and I'm like, okay, what do I want to accomplish this week, and what are some of my goals, and what are some of the major things that I need to do? And so right away into my office, I had to I took about 10 minutes when I got in there, and I jotted some things down in my notes of, okay, I'm going to follow up with all my existing paying clients. I'm going to just recap with everything. I'm going to reconfirm, client sessions that I have today just to ensure that I don't have any cancellations, because I was actually looking forward. I knew I needed some clients to kind of like get back into the zone and have some time where it's just like, okay, I know what I'm doing for this next hour. For the next 3 hours, I've got paying clients, so I want to confirm, because I knew if I had cancellations, sometimes that can be, I'll just say, demoralizing, because it's like, oh, and then, all right, now what am I doing in this time? So I reconfirmed stuff like that. So I made a list of those things. And also I had about 3 or 4 hours. Yeah, it was 4 hours of time, prior to my clients, that I'm like, all right, so I'm just in my office now. And yeah, I had stuff to do. There were some things that were calling me, but it was like, hey, what are the major things I need to get to today? And okay, I need to follow up with this. I need to get back onto Facebook. I need to get back onto Messenger. I need to follow up on some of these messages that I haven't followed up on purpose because I was on vacation. So some of those things, and it kind of set a layout for me to kind of get going. And then in the back of my mind, I knew that once I get going, or at least I was paying attention to it, is that typically when I get into a zone or start following up on things, something clicks and I get going. But I was aware I had like this inner barometer, if you will, of that. And if that didn't click in, so to speak, then what else was I going to do to make sure I got to that space, right? And yesterday I didn't have to worry about it because I got into that space and I got going, which is good. But these are some of the things that I share in order for me to kind of get going. But these are things that I understand about myself. And that goes back to a little while ago where I said, start asking yourself the questions, whether it's now, you might ask yourself the questions, well, how do I, create some accountability for myself? How do I create some self-discipline, etc.? What are some strategies that I have? But you might have to go back to the past to find out when they worked. If that doesn't work, you're sitting there and going, maybe there's never been a time where I've been self-accountable. Okay. Well, now you got to go to some people in your world, if your parents are still around, brothers, sisters, friends, spouses, significant others, people that live with you or have lived with you, roommate from college, for God's sakes, I don't know, but find other people that know you probably better than you know yourself sometimes, And how do you, what situations do you find me to be disciplined in or accountable in or thrive in? And have them do that. Find some people that you really respect in terms of your reputation with them, how they view you, things like that. Like I've got some clients that I work with as well, and that's where that accountability comes from. And they're just like, yeah, Jeff, if I say I'm going to do something and I tell you it, like if I don't do it, like I'm going to be embarrassed. And those are the people that I find where that accountability works. So maybe it's not the mentor coach or the coach, et cetera, or your peer group, but it's some people in your world that you really respect. And so what you're beginning to do there is you're starting to leverage things that you value. I did this in some other calls that I've talked about there is leveraging things that you value. It could be even a monetary thing. Like I've done that with clients in the past. I've done that with myself when I wrote my book. I had a $10,000 deposit to write the book. It was a pretty big project that I was doing, and it was a refundable deposit, and I made them rewrite the contract so it was non-refundable because I knew that I'm not going to lose 10 grand over writer's block or just a bad day. Like that's gonna force me above anything else to get to the library and write a book, and it did. It definitely was one of the things that kept me going. But it's what are we leveraging that we value if we can't somehow find that accountability within ourselves or within our audience. Right, so we've got to have layers of accountability, and that's the thing that I'll start to close with, is that sometimes it's not just one thing or one person that I've said, it's layers of accountability. And when I say layers, meaning it's just, this is my first line of defense, this is the second line, third line, fourth line. Get as many layers as you can in there of accountability, because I like to think about it like this, and I said this years ago with my people and myself, is I want to find a way to help you make it impossible to fail. Said differently, I want to guarantee your success. And obviously we say as coaches and things like, we can't guarantee anything, right? We can't guarantee anyone's success. But in this context, you can say it either way, but how can you guarantee your success? What if there were a way to guarantee your success, or said differently again, to make sure that it's impossible for you to fail? And that's where you set those layers of accountability up. And I bring back that book, I didn't just have that non-refundable $10,000 deposit, but I also spread the word to everybody that I knew on my database and my family and things like that. I did a pre-sale, which I pre-sold copies. So not only did I tell everybody that here's the book and here's what I'm going to have it for, I did it so far as to giving them a date, meaning it was going to be in my hands. I think it was January 5th, if I remember correctly. But it was in January, and I had a date, and I had an event that I was going to do that I did it for, which was further accountability because I was speaking at that event. My mentor coach that I was working with at the time, like I respected him and my reputation with him and the way he viewed me, and it was just like if I didn't follow through with that, it was just like he would just look at me like, dude, you're a joke. And his event I was speaking at, so it was another thing that there's no way I wouldn't have not done that. So there were a lot of things, if you saw, there were layers of accountability as well. There were people in my world that were supporting me and taking care of my son, things like that, and taking care of my grass, for instance. I had my friend, he was doing my grass, he was my neighbor, but he was doing my grass for me, because I didn't want to hire someone, call it cheap, but whatever. I found ways. There's always ways when you ask people, right? And he did my grass for a couple months, like things like that, where and then I was not going to follow through with it when people are doing me favors and helping me out, right? And I'm postponing things, I'm delegating things, I'm stopping things, right? So you can see I had so many layers of accountability and that it was impossible. It was impossible for me to fail. And that was just my examples of highlighting what I mean by that. And they were all things that I was unwilling to compromise. And that's where we really got to get to. And these are, call it extreme, but I say it like this in closing, is that I don't care how you create results. As long as it's legal, ethical, moral, and no one gets hurt physically or mentally, then who cares how you did it? If I had to leverage a $10,000 check, if I didn't do it, then who cares? I wrote a book, right? No one's going to care that, you have to do all these things to just get the discipline to do it. Okay, well, I did it, right? So if I had to murder someone to do it, that's a different story. So in other words, I'm closing here to say to you is I don't care how it gets done, but you've got to find a way of all the things and suggestions I've shared with you today to get in the game and then stay in the game. And then don't ever underestimate that to keep those things going, the biggest thing is once we start growing and create some of that momentum that, oh, well, things are going good now, I can, let my foot off the gas. Let your foot off the gas when you need a break or when you have those moments where you need to get out of the office, but then get right back in there and keep on the gas. And just remember, sometimes it's floored and sometimes it's just kind of like your foot's near it, but you're not really pressing on it and you're coasting a little bit. So that's the realistic expectations that we can have with entrepreneurship, with our business. But the biggest thing is the health of you and your mind and your body as you get in there and execute on a consistent basis.